What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back for the Borderlands 3 countdown, and today I figured I could rank all of the main mission weapons that the player can obtain from worst to best. Now, in order to appear on this list, the gun in question needs to be obtained during the main missions as either a quest reward or as a gun that very consistently drops from a boss or is received from an NPC. So in-mission weapons like the rogue sight won't be included in this video, but something like the Leech will, since it's a gun you can reliably acquire and own as you play through the story. Also, I should note that I'm excluding certain items like shields and relics that are received through the main story quests as entries. What I will say is all of these are pretty good to have, especially if you can get anointed variants like you're seeing with this Moxie's Embrace. But if you want a quick review, the Moxie's Embrace is nice for healing when your shield breaks, the red suit is nice for the radiation aura it emits, which will allow you to irradiate other enemies, and the Road Warrior is kind of okay, though I think you'll find maybe other relics tend to be a little bit better. And finally, definitely be sure to smash like on this video if you're a huge fan of any of these guns, and failing that, just let me know what your favorite main story mission weapon is in the comments section below. Otherwise, guys, we've got a crap load of guns to go over here, so let's start with what I think is the worst of the main mission weapons, and that is the Omni Loader. Though I think it's fair to point out that this is meant to be more of a utility weapon, I don't see the Omni Loader being used all that much. While its special effect is useful, as you can reload everything that's not currently equipped whenever you reload the Omni Loader specifically, it also reminds me a lot of Salvador's autoloader skill from Borderlands 2 that was just never really used that much. Admittedly, this could be a really useful skill for rocket launchers or any other weapon with a long reload time. However, I'd rather use a pistol with a special effect that will make that pistol stronger rather than a pistol that will help me reload other guns. In the grander scheme of things, I don't think you'll ever really need one of these, but then again, who knows? Maybe this will be awesome once the DLC starts to come out, but for now, I think it's something you can sell once you've completed Chapter 14's The Family Jewel. This brings us to our next entry, which is going to be for the Starkiller. The Starkiller is pretty much what you might expect it to be, as it's a fire elemental laser from Maliwan. Like many other Maliwan weapons, this means you have to charge the gun up in order for it to start firing, but you at least get a beam laser projectile which is pretty consistent and precise. Where I think problems arise is when it comes to the weapon's recoil and damage. Recoil is usually a problem on beam weapons and not really unique to the Starkiller, though it does make the gun a little harder to use than most other weapons you could come across. As far as damage goes, this is the biggest problem with the Starkiller, as the base damage seems pretty low to me. It's not terrible during your first playthrough, but I think you will start to notice it during true Vault Hunter mode and Mayhem difficulty, where many generic blue and purple pistols will have noticeably greater base damage. I think you'll find that compared to many other main mission weapons that the Starkiller just leaves something to be desired. That said, if you want it, it's received for completing Chapter 8, Space Laser Tag. Number 13. The Agonizer 1500. Maybe some of you will be upset that I ranked this one lower, but I'm not really all that crazy about the Agonizer 1500. While it's kind of cool in that it's a buzzsaw launcher, this also tends to be the issue with it. After all, you can't hit anything in the air, and when the buzzsaws are deployed, they have to swirl around enemies before hitting them, which makes this thing less than ideal for achieving second wins. The Agonizer also has a pretty low durability, and while this can be increased through the use of some skills, you're still going to have a lot of problems that are inherent to the Agonizer itself, and at that point, you might be better off with another launcher. I suppose it's not all bad, as I actually kind of like the anointed version that I have here, but I think in the grander scheme of things, you should be able to find better launchers out there. But if you insist, this thing has a very high chance to drop from Pain and Terror during Chapter 17's Blood Drive. But now with some of the lesser main mission weapons out of the way, we could start to talk about some of the decent ones, like the Leech. Now, despite the lower ranking I've given this one, I don't think the Leech is really that bad when you consider it's something you could obtain towards the beginning of the game, after you've completed Chapter 4 Taking Flight. It comes with a lot of good parts, like a magazine that allows for quick reloads, a blade accessory which is nice for when and if you want to melee enemies, and it's also got a pretty cool unique effect on the taser, which allows you to heal off of the damage that you deal. Hence the name, the Leech. Unfortunately, this ability is locked to the taser alt-fire mode of the gun, which is a bummer and may make the gun harder to use at higher levels. Additionally, the Leech can only deal non-elemental damage on its base shots, which is a problem in Mayhem mode as normal bullets are often debuffed. Even still, it's a decent pistol for the super early game, and if it's your very first playthrough, I suspect you'll get a lot of use out of it in the Yridian outskirts. Speaking of pistols, we have the Killing Word. Though it's obtained before you get the Leech, I think the Killing Word is an ever so slightly better pistol. This is because the gun has fairly low recoil, high rate of fire, and decent durability for a Children of the Vault weapon, which contributes to fairly decent DPS and ease of use. However, I think what both helps and cripples the Killing Word is its special effect, which allows the Killing Word to fire sonic sine wave style projectiles at enemies. The sine wave projectiles make the gun less accurate if you're trying to perform criticals or fire over long distances, and thus, you're kind of limited to spraying and praying with this thing. That said, I wouldn't totally count this thing out, and once you've beaten the game a couple of times, it can be an okay choice if you're looking for a decent Children of the Vault pistol. As you likely know, this drops from Mouthpiece during and after Chapter 3 Cult Following, so if you want to get your hands on one of these, that's how you do it. But now that we've got a bunch of the pistols out of the way, we can finally start to talk about other weapon types, and to start, we'll talk about the Null Pointer. So the Null Pointer is a gun that can be pretty easy to miss, and actually resulted in this video getting a little delayed, so I could play through the entire game again just to get a level 50 variant. Funnily enough though, you actually get this one twice during Chapter 6's Hostile Takeover, as you can get one when you loot one of the Maliwan chests in the weapon cache with Zero, and you can also get another one when Zero trades you for the special item you help him obtain in that particular weapon cache. The variant I got here has an item score of 585 and has a base damage of 2,334, which is pretty good for a Hyperion sniper. It's also got a good shield capacity that rivals many of the best Hyperion snipers, though unlike some of the other Hyperion snipers I've seen, it does seem to reflect damage back at attackers rather than amplifying your damage or returning those bullets to your magazine. It's a cool effect, though I think you may find the other effects are preferable. That, and since this is non-elemental, it is a little weaker in Mayhem mode, so that's something else to keep in mind. Overall, I like this sniper. Just don't make the mistake I did and sell it. Number 9. The Cloud Kill. Fans of Borderlands 2 will know quite a bit about this one since Cloud Kill was one of Maya's skills from Borderlands 2. It had a reputation for being fairly overpowered, and it's nice to see it return in the form of a legendary SMG for Borderlands 3. When the Cloud Kill's projectiles hit enemies, just like Maya's old skill, they will emit this corrosive mist cloud that will deal some damage over time. The damage here isn't as amazing as it was in Borderlands 2, however, the Cloud Kill can be a great gun to get your hands on, assuming you need a decent corrosive weapon. Granted, it won't be as effective as some of the more powerful corrosive legendaries out there, but considering you get it as you play through the main missions, I think that's a fair trade-off. My only real complaint is that this is a Maliwan SMG and therefore takes some time to charge in order to fire, but I will note that's not a huge issue. If you want this thing, be sure to talk to Ava as much as you can during Chapter 10, Beneath the Meridian. For our next entry, we have another SMG, and that's going to be the Redistributor. So the Redistributor just so happens to be one of my favorite of the main mission reward weapons in Borderlands 3. Though it could come at a lower level in your initial playthrough, the gun itself is pretty good and is something I think that's worth acquiring again once you reach maximum level. The inherent shield can be useful for blocking attacks, however, what I think is really good about the gun is its special effect, which not only allows every 7th shot to deal enhanced damage, but also allows every 7th shot to potentially chain to other enemies. So as you fire, you can have your projectiles hit other enemies much like you can with Jacob's weapons on criticals. And since this is a shock weapon, this can end up being really useful for stripping shields. I think this is a great SMG you'll likely get a lot of use out of for subsequent playthroughs until you obtain guns that are much stronger. If you want this thing, all you have to do is complete Chapter 7, The Impending Storm, and it's yours. Number 7. The Hand of Glory. The Hand of Glory is one of the guaranteed legendaries you can obtain during Borderlands 3's main story. To get your hands on one, all you have to do is play through Chapter 13's The Gun of Reliance, and you'll get one of these. Functionally, the Hand of Glory is 2-round burst and can fire 3 volleys in relatively quick succession with a brief pause in between to cycle the gun. This ensures pretty good DPS, and assuming you're able to pull off all criticals, you should be able to dish out quite a bit of damage. My only complaint is that the Hand of Glory doesn't appear to have a fixed scope. It's not the end of the world if you get iron sights, but I do think the scoped variants tend to be a little bit better. In the end, the Hand of Glory is a pretty nice legendary and is certainly well worth using. Number 6. The Cold Shoulder. So, the Cold Shoulder is a pretty decent cryo weapon that you can obtain once you complete Chapter 11 Hammerlocked. The cryo element ends up being pretty useful on a sniper rifle, thanks in part to how frozen enemies will take more damage on criticals. Failing that you freeze them, the cryo element can also be used to slow enemies' movements, which of course makes them easier to crit with the Cold Shoulder. Stat-wise, you're getting a ×2 projectile multiplier, okay magazine size and fire rate, and you're also getting double underbarrel rockets, which are nice for damage output. Plus, they can also come in handy for when you want to quickly freeze enemies, since the likelihood of freezing with these seems to be a little bit better than the conventional projectiles. Overall though, I think you'll agree the Cold Shoulder is a pretty good sniper, so again, just complete Chapter 11 and it's yours. This brings us to our 5 final main mission weapons, and to start, we'll go ahead and talk about the Quota Miser. I suspect from many Borderlands 3 fans out there that the Quota Miser was the first legendary that they got their hands on. After all, it's a virtually guaranteed drop from the Rampager both during and after Chapter 10 beneath the Yridian. However, and despite being acquired so easily, it's actually a pretty decent legendary that can potentially come in handy from time to time. Whenever you fire the Quota Miser, it will fire 4 rockets in a horizontal spread. However, and at least in my experience, it always seems to fairly consistently fire a set of radiation rockets first, then some corrosive rockets, and then some fire rockets. The quad will deviate from this from time to time, but largely, this order seems pretty consistent, and if you want my opinion, it's actually a pretty good thing, since you can usually accurately predict and then fire the right type of rockets at the right type of enemies. If you can, I'd recommend you take the time to farm for an anointed variant like the one I've got here, since these are so easy to get. But assuming you don't want to take the time to do that, getting your hands on a Quota Miser will ensure you have a decent launcher to use at max level, or at least until you can find something that's better. This brings us to our 4th place entry, which is the Whispering Ice. While not especially great at freezing enemies, the Whispering Ice is still a great debuff grenade that will not only slow enemies down thanks to its cryo element, but also has the potential to knock enemies around thanks to the ice stalagmites that form upon a successful detonation. The way this grenade works is when you throw it, it will spawn about 6 child grenades that either detonate after a short period of time, or whenever an enemy is unfortunate enough to walk over the mines. You could also throw it directly at enemies too if you want the effects to be more instant, so that's certainly another option if you decide to go that route. Maybe I'm biased, but I just really like this grenade. While I wouldn't recommend you use it if you want to freeze enemies, it is good for stunning, damaging, and knocking them around. So be sure to keep it once you complete Chapter 12, Lair of the Harpy. And for the bronze and in 3rd place, we have the Occultist. So, the Occultist in some ways is reminiscent of Borderlands 2's Unkempt Herald. After all, it's a torque pistol that fires an initial projectile that seemingly spawns additional ones as it travels through the air. Unlike the Unkempt Herald though, where the additional projectiles split from the initial, the Occultists spawn and swirl around the initial, which ends up making the weapon less effective and ultimately less impressive. This doesn't mean the Occultist is bad per se, as in fact it can be a fairly powerful gun to use up against anything that's really big and or has a really big crit spot. But beyond that, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. After all, the projectile speed is definitely on the slower side, and given how difficult it can be to get these swirling rockets to hit a smaller target, I think you'll agree that the Occultist is just less useful for mobbing. Again, it's not really that bad and can actually be pretty good in the right situations, though I would recommend you refrain from using it if you plan on taking on a lot of mobs. If you want it, it drops virtually 100% of the time from Troy, both during and after Chapter 19, The Great Vault. Number 2. The Traitors Death. So, the Traitors Death is a lever-action rifle from Jacobs that's obtained upon completing Chapter 15, Going Rogue. Despite having some similarities to sniper rifles, it's actually got pretty good fire rate and reload speed, and as far as damage is concerned, it could scale to pretty impressive levels thanks to its special effect. What this thing does is allows you a 25% chance to deal double damage as Incendiary. From what I could tell, Incendiary damage bonus appears to apply to this damage like you see on other weapons, and rather than replace the non-elemental damage you would normally deal, this double Incendiary damage is added on, potentially more than tripling your damage assuming the enemy is weak to fire. This said, it is worth noting that this effect isn't something you should consistently rely on. While the chance is 25%, you can easily fire 6 to 8 times and not get the effect to trigger at all. Still, when this effect does proc, it can be pretty powerful and should go well with builds that specialize in dealing criticals and incendiary type damage. In my opinion, the Traitors Death is pretty good and is one of the better main mission rewards that are available. Just complete Chapter 15 and it's yours. And finally, at number 1 for the gold, we have the Yridian Fabricator. Though this is more of a utility weapon and you're not going to be able to use it for combat, it's probably the most useful of the main mission weapons for a number of reasons. The ability to spawn any gun just so happens to include high-quality blues and purples, and in my experience, I've been able to get some pretty decent non-uniques with high item scores. So assuming you have the Iridium, this could be a good way to farm for Vladov snipers, mashers, and even some Tediors, assuming you're having a hard time finding some decent ones out in the wild. On top of this though, the Yridian Fabricator's spawned weapons can also be useful for replenishing your ammo. All you have to do is simply pick up the guns in question, and you'll usually get some ammo restored for the corresponding weapon type. So beyond just non-uniques, you can also use the Yridian Fabricator to get some ammo as well. Ultimately, I think the Yridian Fabricator is pretty good, as I've managed to get a few Vladov double-barreled Creech pistols this way. So if you want it, you get it upon completing Chapter 21 in the Footsteps of Giants. Alright guys, I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to smash like, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload my next Borderlands video, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.